Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Tapon. I'm here with Gary Arndt. He's been on the show a few times. And welcome back, Gary.
Thanks for having me.
It's been, over a year for sure that you've been doing your Everything Everywhere daily podcast. Am I right?
Yeah, I started on July 1st, 2020.
I actually took your advice because originally I was only listening to episodes that had titles that looked interesting to me. And then you said, no, Francis, you're wrong. You should just listen to everyone, even the ones that don't sound interesting, because you're going to learn something. And I took your advice, and you're right.
We live in a bubble, ever more so. Even though we have access to all the information in the world online, we really only see things that algorithms tell us we want to see. So if the algorithms say, oh, well, you like World War II history, it'll show you more World War II history. But it won't show you something from Roman history or Chinese history.
Or how to bake a cake.
Yeah, and so the only way to really do that, and part of the reason for my podcast is to expose you to things. You remember that Donald Rumsfeld press conference from the Iraq War?
The known unknowns and the unknown knowns.
So
the known unknowns.
My podcast is about unknown unknowns. It's about, I didn't even know that was a thing type experience that you can learn and do it in just like 10 minutes.
It's brilliant for that. And yeah, I actually do listen to every episode you put out, and I congratulate you, and I'm glad it's doing well. I mean, it is doing well, correct? I mean, how are things going?
Yeah, it's doing about 130,000 downloads a month. It's plateaued the last 2 months, but some of that may have had to do with there was a bug with Apple.
Yeah.
Under-reporting downloads. And when they fixed it, I did notice they went back up, as well as a seasonal thing. Podcasts usually slow down in the summers and pick up again around September when school starts. That's
weird. I mean, I guess I can understand why, I suppose. Yeah.
It's also just, it's part of the nature of the medium. And it's the good thing and the bad thing about it. Podcasting is the last thing in the internet that is a throwback to the way the internet used to be.
How so?
Now everything is run by algorithms. And one of the frustrations I've had with, say, running a blog is that there are no blogs anymore. There are websites, but all of, like, just, for travel, which is, our background, my travel blog used to be a blog. I started traveling, and I would leave my thoughts for wherever I was for that day on my website. I would just write something pithy for a headline, and I wasn't doing SEO. I wasn't worrying about keyword research or anything like that. And people would come to my website every day, or they read it through RSS, and that's what it was. And then eventually that stopped because people would follow. You expected to get stuff on Facebook or Twitter, and as a result, the percentage of traffic that came from places like Google increased and increased. So people began doing more and more to appease Google, and now everything is just listicles. Top 15 things to do in this place, and it's all SEO driven. And one of the best quotes I've heard in the last year was someone saying, if you are creating content for an algorithm, you have no audience. You may have traffic, right? But you don't have readers. You really don't. You don't have anyone that knows who you are and cares what you have to say and wants to hear more about you in the future. You have people that accidentally went to your website to get the information they were looking for and then left and probably will never return.
Right.
But with podcasting, if someone's listening to this show, they know who you are. You're the host. And they know your voice. They have a better idea of who you are as a person. So that's the good part. The frustrating part is that there is no algorithm. So you can't game the algorithm, which I've historically done a really good job of doing for things like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. But because there's no algorithm, you have to basically create something that people want to share. And, and word of mouth is slow. And that's a very difficult thing to do. It's the best and worst of the internet. But I think at the end of the day, it's far better than the alternative, which is having these giant companies sort of control who gets to see what.
True. And speaking about giant companies that control things, I went to your fan page and I see that you're really getting into porn lately.
Yeah, my fan page got hijacked a couple days ago on Facebook, and Facebook notified me It's like, dude, just to let you know, you've lost control of your fan page. And then there is no means to contact someone or to rectify the problem. It doesn't exist. And I've spent a very long time going through everything that is publicly available on Facebook to solve this problem. I've started tweeting them, trying to contact Facebook on Twitter. But there's nothing you can do. It's infuriating that they literally, it's not that they don't have customer service, but they have anti-customer service where they go out of their way. It's like, sometimes on Halloween you go trick-or-treating and there's that one person's house where they turn all the lights off and they hide because they don't want to have to deal with kids at the front door. That's Facebook with customer service. They're literally turning the lights off, closing the drapes, and hiding so nobody can contact them because they don't want to pay money for it.
Crazy. What do you think is going to happen in, let's say, 50 years or maybe even 30 years? Do you think Facebook is going to be replaced by what?
A lot of Facebook now skews older as a demographic. I don't know if you've seen any of the stats on that, but there's a lot of kids in high school that simply either don't have Facebook accounts or don't use Facebook. And I also think no one trusts Facebook. I think it's one of those things of the network effect gone haywire, where, the more people in a system, the greater the value, that there's a lot of people on Facebook because they're on Facebook. And I am now spending most of my time on Discord, to be honest. There are Discord communities. They're smaller. Everyone there. No one's tracking you. There's no ads. So it's a much better, and it's basically a throwback again to the old days of the internet, where it might have been an IRC server. Discord servers were originally created for gamers to coordinate their play, so you can do voice as well as share images and text and things like that. It's like Slack if you're familiar with that, but it's not necessarily for a business environment. And that's where I've been spending most of my time, and that's where I would prefer people actually interact. The problem is everyone is so accustomed to just doing stuff on Facebook that it's hard to get them away from it.
Do you have a schedule, Gary? Because you always respond quickly to my emails, and I think anybody's emails, not just me. And you respond well on social media like Facebook, for example. And I haven't tested you too much on Twitter, but do you have a schedule? Since there's so many different platforms out there, how do you do it? Do you say, okay, I'm going to spend half an hour on this, 15 minutes on that, or it's just kind of ad hoc?
I just don't have a life. I rarely check LinkedIn. That's just not a big deal to me because everything I do is basically public facing. It's not a B2B thing. I don't really care about LinkedIn too much. And there's also just a lot of people on LinkedIn. Everyone's a coach or they're trying to sell some sort of, training program. And I don't care about any of that. And Discord, there's a podcasting group on Discord that's grown a lot in the last few weeks. And a lot of big name people are hanging out there. And it's just a far better community than anything in social media. I think Twitter is toxic. Facebook is just brain dead. Instagram, they've killed so much organic reach because they want people to buy ads. So Facebook has been purposely trying to kill the influencer economy because if you pay $1,000 to an influencer, that's $1,000 that Facebook sees that is not going to Facebook. So they've been reducing organic reach for everyone slowly over time, and they're going to make it such that if you want to reach people, you have to buy an ad and do it through Facebook.
What about Clubhouse?
I was doing that for a while, and Clubhouse is just a joke now. It's the same people having the same discussions over and over.
I haven't participated in it, but
you've missed it already.
Okay.
The golden age of Clubhouse was in February and January. It's gone.
2021. Okay.
Yeah, and when I say it's the same people having the same discussions, I mean that in a very literal sense. There are people, there was this time when Twitter came out and became a big thing. And then there was this rush if you don't get on board something early, you're going to miss it. And Google Plus came out. There was a lot of this activity, but it wasn't because people loved Google Plus. It was because they all want to get their numbers up and do that. And that's what happened with Clubhouse. You had this group of people, and they're literally spending 12 hours a day on Clubhouse, which is insane.
Yeah.
Because it's Clubhouse is as if in a world where there was only Netflix, someone invented live TV. And they said, hey, I have this new idea. It's video, but you can only watch it if you're sitting there at the right time. And that's what Clubhouse is. And so they try organizing these rooms, but quite frankly, it's the same discussions over and over. The travel story that changed your life. Okay, maybe we could talk about that once, and then doing it next week and next week and next week. It's like, well, what the hell are you going to say? And that's what it's become. And people are trying to, get all these followers and everything. And I just think that moment has passed. And there was this talk like, oh, Clubhouse is going to kill podcasting. No, it's not. That's like saying Twitter is going to kill books. No, it's not going to happen.
Let's talk about your top few episodes that in the last year, it could be the top 5. It doesn't really matter, or whatever that pops into mind as some of the ones that you found either the most memorable or surprising or noteworthy in one way or another. What comes to mind, Gary?
One that kind of always sticks out is the story of Joe Medicine Crow, who was the last Crow war chief. Joseph Medicine Crow fought in World War II, and he's a member of the Crow Nation. And in the Crow Nation, they had a title called a war chief, and it wasn't a title which was given. You had to earn it, and you had to earn it in battle. And the way you traditionally earn it is that you had to do 4 things. You had to touch an enemy during battle without killing them. That's called counting coup. You had to steal an enemy's weapon. You had to successfully lead a war party and return alive. And you had to steal a horse. Joseph Medicine Crow did all 4 of those things in World War II, including the stealing a horse. The first 2 he did, he was in a village, I think in Belgium, and he turned a corner at the same time another German soldier was turning a corner, and they bumped into each other. And they fought on the ground, and they wrestled, and he ended up grabbing the German soldier's rifle, and the German soldier said something like "mother," and it kind of broke up the hold they were in, and the German soldier ran away. So he both got the counting coup part and the stealing the weapon part. He was a scout, so he was doing reconnaissance before the main units arrived. And there's a legend that he was the first American actually to enter German territory in the war. So he actually did lead a party that he actually received the French Legion of Honor for doing this. So that was the third part. And then towards the end of the war, they were going to this place that was held by the SS, and they had 40 thoroughbred horses. And they were going to start mortaring it. And he goes to the commanding officer and he says, hey, before you do this, let me go in and steal the horses. So he goes in really early in the morning before anyone gets up. He just uses a horse as a bridle, and he gets on one of the horses, opens up the gate, and herds them all out. And he got the stealing an enemy horse thing. And when he came back to Montana and he was talking to the elders about his war exploits, he didn't even realize it. They said, you did everything for the title of a war chief. You've earned the title of war chief. And so he is the last, not only member of the Crow Nation, but I think any Plains Indian to have achieved it. And he did it in World War II.
Amazing. And speaking about the last person in World War II, there's also the story of, I think, the last person to die in World War I, maybe, or was it World War II? That guy who got out of the trench, and I think it was World War I. He got out of the trench and just ran basically on a suicide mission. And the Germans, I guess, didn't want to shoot him, but they eventually had to. And the armistice or the surrender officially was going to happen at noon, and he ran at 11:59. You can tell the story better than I can.
Yeah, so it was Sergeant Henry Gunther. And when the armistice was signed at, I want to say, around 6 a.m. in the morning, and at 11 is when everything was going to end. And you'd think that when the word gets out, hey everyone, the war is going to end at 11, that you would basically just bide your time and do nothing and wait for 11, right?
Which is what most people did, actually.
But there were a lot, especially the Americans, who didn't do that. They kept fighting till the very end because they assumed that the armistice would probably fall apart. And they didn't want to give up any territory. So like the American artillery units literally timed it so that they fired their last shot such that it would land just before the stroke of 11. And a lot of the artillery units also, they didn't want to have to deal with all of the munitions that were sitting there. So they just fired everything off. So they didn't have to deal with inventory and taking it back or anything. And in the case of Henry Gunther, basically, they were pinned down by some Germans with a machine gun in this tiny village in France. They knew they just had to wait till 11. The Germans knew that they had to wait till 11. And for whatever reason, he gets up and starts charging. And the guys in his unit say, stop, stop, go back. The Germans are shouting, stop, stop, go back. And he's attacking the German position, and they fire, killing him instantly. And if he had, it's really unknown. He was demoted. He was a sergeant. He was demoted back to being a private. And some people think that it may have been his chance to redeem himself. He lost his fiancée over it back home, so maybe it was depression and he was trying to suicide himself, and this was the last opportunity to do it. Nobody knows.
What's your most downloaded episode?
May have been one about the 7 people that run the internet.
I don't remember if I listened to that particular one. I must have.
That has to do with the domain name system.
Oh, yeah.
Now the way the domain name system, it's hierarchical, and at the end of it, there's a single set of servers that control everything. And there's this elaborate system where 7 people have keys where they could reboot this ultimate last server if they actually needed to. And they have basically a ceremony that takes place twice a year where they generate these keys and they have witnesses to signify it, and it's recorded. And the 7 people are from all over the world, and it's a thing that they do. And if it should be corrupted, that's what they would do to fix it. And I think that got passed around in some technology circles. Every so often, I'll get an episode that's passed around like that, and it'll get a spike in traffic. And a real early one that I had a spike was the world's most dominant athlete. I use the word dominant. I'm very picky about it, and it's the world's greatest horseshoe pitcher. He basically has won everything. Almost everything for the last 25 years, or more than that, for 30 years, because he won his first world championship in 1989. Then he's won 24 championships. So he's won them in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and then last year's the world championship was canceled. But he's still the world's greatest horseshoe pitcher and was expected to win. So if he wins this year, and I actually need to follow up on it, they may have done it, he would have won a world championship in 5 different decades.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And it's horseshoe pitching, so he could be a great horseshoe pitcher, into his 60s. It's not like it's football or something.
What do you think about the fact that certain Olympians can get a lot more medals than others? For example, I just heard that a Cuban Greco-Roman wrestler won the last 4 gold medals. So that's 16 years, or actually now because we skipped a year, so it's actually 17 years of gold medals. So basically the maximum that you could really get. And then you got Michael Phelps, who's got over 22.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously swimming and gymnastics are the 2 areas where you can earn multiple medals. And if you look at the all-time, I just did an episode on this for like the Olympic greatest Olympian. But I should say this about Michael Phelps. He's also more than doubled the next closest medal count for anyone in swimming. So even though swimming is inflated, what he did in swimming was far greater by a wide margin than what anyone else has ever done in swimming. So yeah, in swimming, it's like, okay, swim this distance. Now do it this way. Now do it this way. So there's 4 different strokes. Okay, now you did 50. Now you do 100. Now you do 200. Okay, now we're going to do it with 4 of your buddies. Now we're going to do it with 4 of your buddies, but you're all going to swim different strokes. And so they just mix and match it so much that it's easy. And there's some sports I think that could do more medals. Archery is a good one. Archery only has men's, women's, and then they have the men's, women's team, and then they have a mixed team, and that's it. They don't do different distances. They don't do recurve versus compound bows, which is something they may do in the future. So one of the biggest Olympic stories this year was a woman. South Korea is great at archery. Don't know why, but she basically had a perfect Olympics. She won the individual gold medal, setting an Olympic record. She won the women's team medal, setting an Olympic record, and then she won the mixed team event, setting an Olympic record. So she literally could not have done any better. Her name is An San. I'm thinking of actually doing an episode like a recap of the Olympics for all the stories that you didn't hear, because there's a lot of these that kind of get overlooked because you only, like in the U.S., we only hear about stuff where the Americans were involved.
Right.
Like I was wondering who won the 100-meter dash this year, only to find out, oh, they already did it, and the guy who won was Italian.
Right.
And it wasn't, a Jamaican or an American.
Right.
He was an Italian. Granted, he has an American father, but he's lived his whole life in Italy. He knows, speaks absolutely fluent Italian. That's his first language. And I didn't hear about it because of this. And there's other things like that as well. The guy you mentioned in Greco-Roman, there's been a few people that have won gold medals at 4 different Olympics.
Right.
If the women's basketball team wins a gold medal this year, both Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi will have won gold medals at 5 Olympics.
Wow.
And that's only been done by one other person, Steve Redgrave, who is a rower from Britain.
Wow.
Now, here's the great thing. Diana Taurasi is 39. And the next Olympics is 3 years away, not 4 years away. So she would be 42, which is very possible to be playing at a competitive level, especially if you want a seasoned leader on your team. She could become the first person in history to win a gold medal in 6 different Olympics if she's on the team in Paris in 2024. And I kind of hope she is, just because.
And if she wins, and if their team wins.
Well, yeah. But the American women in basketball are, I think, very clearly the best team in the world. And I can say that more than I can about the men. The men won the gold medal this year, but I think it's very plausible that there are European teams out there that could beat them, because there's a lot of really good. The last 3 MVPs in the NBA came from Europe.
Why, by the way, does the American team not sport its best NBA players often? Is it because they're afraid of injury, or they're just not compensated enough?
Injury, that's one of the big things. You do get a few star. Kevin Durant was on the team this year. LeBron James has been on it in the past, but it's not considered to be a thing. In
weird.
soccer.
If I'm an NBA player and I have a chance to get a gold medal in the Olympics, I'd be like, yeah, sign me up. I don't care if I'm on the bench.
I do think it's injury. The NBA is never really strongly behind it. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's I think the best player in the NBA right now, is with the Bucks. He just won an NBA title. Was not on the Greece team. He's from Greece, and he probably should have been.
Right, but I can understand a little bit more, just because Greece has no hope in hell in winning a gold medal or even any medal, and so therefore I understand.
If he was on the team, they absolutely could be in medal contention.
Okay, all right, I trust you on that one.
Maybe not a gold medal, but I think they absolutely. Giannis and his brothers, he has like 4 different basketball playing brothers. They could make up the Greek team. and they would. I'm not even joking, because they all play either professional or highly competitive basketball. Yeah, I think maybe not a gold, but certainly a silver or a bronze is not out of the question at all. Greece actually does have a good pro league, one of the best in Europe.
Okay,
I'd say along with Spain.
Okay. So I'll take that one back, but you understand my point. Is if you come from a country, I don't know, like Iceland, and you happen to play on the NBA. But Iceland doesn't have a chance. Why would I join the national team? Because I'm just basically having a chance of getting injured. It doesn't make any sense.
Slovenia was in the semifinals
right, but Slovenia, yeah.
But
Slovenia.
Serbia, Germany, Russia, France, Spain, all have really
Decent
good.
teams.
But that's where most of the foreign NBA players come from.
Right. Croatia,
and-
they had sometimes too.
Yeah, and well, China had Yao Ming, but I don't think there's been a lot of players from China, and there are players from various countries in Africa as well. Many of them, however, are coming to school for the U.S. They're playing college, and they learn a lot of basketball outside of their native country. So they may play for a national team, but I think it's kind of hit or miss with what kind of team they can put together.
And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. And here's one last reason to remember Tapon. If you like what I do and would like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. And now for 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it somewhere. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.